If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell icon to get the latest updates.
So today we start with something known as debugging in Studio. Okay. So for that I selected a class. Let me see whether it's this one or this one. Just a minute. Yeah. So, let's start with this. How does debugging happen in Studio? Okay. First and foremost, it's a small studio. Okay. A small studio. Today we are actually going to cover something known as debugging in Studio. Okay. Why it is necessary? First, we'll go with that. Okay. Why it is important? Why it is important to understand debugging? How debugging is advantageous in when you are developing complex integration. In simple studios also it is good, but in complex integration it plays a more important role. So why debugging is used? Now remember, every other program that humans build, it's not 100% perfect, right? So it either of the things change, either of the scenarios change, or either of the there is no code that is 100% efficient, right? So some of the other thing has to be done there. So sometimes it happens that error happens in a code because of some scenario that the program is not meant to handle. Okay, if the programmer was smart enough, he could have created such an error handler that would show us proper. It would show us the proper error, how to handle that error. But sometimes it happens that the programmer has not done a programming to catch such kind of errors. Okay, and we are not understanding how the error is coming from, like why this error is coming from. Okay, we have now in case of a small studio where we have three components, it's easy to determine. Okay, we have three components, we can just go to first, second, or third component. Either of the component would have an error. Okay, like the one that I'm showing in front of my screen. This is a very small studio. Okay, if error comes also, I'll be able to get into 5 minutes and I'll get the errors. But if let's take, if I'm taking an example of a studio which is something like this, I'll just show you. Not this one also. Yeah. Let's take an example of a studio which is looks something like this. Okay. Now a bit complicated studio. Okay. So it does many things. So if error comes in this, like, and there are many XSLTs. Okay. One goes to, so one data goes to another data, other data. Like if you're seeing that there are many XSLTs written, one XSLT, two XSLT, set third XSLT. So if any error comes in any of the XSLT, which the XSLT is not meant to handle those errors. Okay, so now there can be a problem there. Now if a error comes in such kind of a studio like you're seeing in front of your screen, I'll just this is the studio. If some kind of error comes in this kind of studio, it's hard to find at times. Okay, so either you have to be, either programmer is very smart enough that he has done a very nice error handling mechanism and you know exactly where to reach and where the error is. That's the first thing. Okay, the program has built in, the studio has been built in such a way that you know that, okay, the audit file says you that it's coming from this component, and you directly go to that component and you find the error. Okay, sometimes it does not happen. Okay, sometimes I would not say sometimes, but most of the cases it does not happen. Okay, so you have to find where the error is. How do there are two, now there are two ways of doing that. Okay, a consolidated report. Okay, first is a consolidated report, and second is a debugging process. Now, debugging you must have heard of. So, uh, do you know about the consolidated report process?
So,
We download when the integration runs into error. We download the consolidated report from
yes,
the integration, and we run it over here to see.
yeah, from the tenant, and then we upload it here and we run it.
So you are aware of that process, right? So
Yes.
that is one process which shows us the error also. A quick process, I would say. Okay, a quick process. Many times I take the consolidated report thing into my thing to solve errors. Okay, but when the errors are too deep, okay, happens that consolidated reports might not pick up that error. Okay, let's say it's a logical mistake. Okay, so in the output you are getting the value as wrong being calculated. The studio is not throwing out an error. Okay, but the value is being calculated wrong. Okay, for an example, it was expected to come as 20, but somehow how the studio is giving 18. Okay, client said that we have done our calculation and it should come 18. It should not come 20. So no, studio has given no error to us, right? It has given a value, but that value is incorrect value. So there is a logical error, okay, inside. So somewhere there is a calculation done inside studio which is not correct.
Yeah.
So in this case, consolidated report might not work, right? It may not say that there is an error yet. Okay. In this case, we'll go with the debugging. Okay. Now, how debugging would help us? Okay. I'll tell you that. So first, I will start with a very basic, then we'll go slowly and slowly to the advanced. Okay. For debugging, the first thing is you need to have a perspective. See, there is a bug kind of icon here. Okay, which should show up in your studio. Let's say if it does not show up, what should you do? Okay, the first thing is like you have Workday perspective. This is a report designer perspective. It may be available for you, it may not be available for you, depends on whether you have downloaded that perspective or not. Now, this perspective is basically meant for bird reports. Okay.
Okay.
And the third kind of perspective is this debug perspective. Some people don't see the debug perspective. Okay, so let's say we have only two. Let's say there was no third perspective, so you have to just click here. Okay, and you can open that perspective like debug.
Okay.
And you'll open and it will open. Okay, so that we have different other perspectives also apart from these. Okay, so and we'll come over here. So that's the debug perspective. First and foremost, we need to check whether debug perspective is there on our system or not. If it is not there, first we'll activate it.
Okay.
That's the first task done. Second task is how do we apply debug on this studio. So what does debug do? How do we do debug exactly here? Few things to remember. Let's take an example of this integration. Okay, simple integration. It has a 3-component integration. What it is doing, let's see first. If I go to start here, there is a launch parameter which take country and date as input. Okay, default country is France. I have to map it again. I'll have to, because it will error out because it's as per some different tenant. So the tenant I'm connected to, what I'll do, I'll map it to a country field here. So this is the country field. I see countries, and I would take a default value, let's say. As same France. Okay, I can take it. I'm just taking. So okay, I'll save it. Now the first thing is what I did a country. I configured a country. There is a date field which is date field and like default values today. Okay, so here also I'll do what Okay, let's be this like this only. There's no default value, we'll give a default value.
Okay.
We'll see whether any services are there or not. So there is a service which is an integration, which is nothing but as attribute map service. And in attribute map service, there is no attribute, but there is a map. Okay, country map, in which country and text is given. So let's again first configure back this country here as per the tenant we have connected. So this is mapped. Okay, country is mapped. Launch parameters, we go here. We say country and date. Services, we come here. We see country map. Okay, there is a map for country. We'll know. I'll tell you why we have created this map. Okay. Next is we try to capture these things. Okay. First, we try to capture the country. So how do we capture the country? We'll capture the country with. So it will give us the reference ID of the country. Now, in order to get the country name, we have to use something known as lp.getDescriptor country, then with whatever the with we received. So it will give us country name. Okay. IA language. Okay. So IA means integration attributes. Okay. End sys.integration map lookup country map props country name. Now what is this? Basically, when it will pass the country name, and in opposite to country name, we'll in the text field we'll say in France French is spoken. So this field would have inside it French. Okay, means French, and date is a normal date. Okay, and what we do is we just pass the country that was selected was the country name. The language spoken in that country is this language, and today's date is this date. Okay, quite a right. So let's do one thing. Let's deploy the studio. Okay. Hello country. So let's deploy the studio. So the studio is deployed. Okay. Now I need not go on tenant. Okay. Now I want to run my studio from here only. I need not go on the tenant level. Okay.
Okay.
So now if you see here, this is our studio. Okay. And if I yeah. So if I do this, so we'll see here also the okay. If I click here, I'm trying to go to start here. Okay, that's it. So from here, what I'll do, I'll tell you. Now I will run the studio in debug mode. How do we do that? We'll right click it and we'll on debug integration. When we something like this appears, okay. What all things it is taking? It is taking a country as a launch parameter. You are looking at it, this right? Country. Expand this. So yeah, you see country as a launch parameter, right? Which is default to France, and date. So date I'll give us today's date only. Okay, let's say today's date. Okay. So once done, I'll just minimize it. I've given open debug dialog. So open debug dialog. I've clicked on this. Let me give my why it's not taking launch parameter. Yeah, just taking this. Okay, now it has the debug this, right? Now once I click on debug, you will see what happens. So down below, see this. Okay.
Yes.
So it is launching the integration in the tenant. Okay. Now it is launching the integration in the tenant. Now it has started doing its. It has started launching the studio in the tenant, and basically it is trying to open a debug mode. Once it is 100%, it will open a debug mode. But before that, I wanted to set a toggle point. I'll tell you what is a toggle breakpoint. So it is asking to switch to debug perspective. Okay. So once I switch to debug perspective, see something like this appears. Okay, a complicated kind of a window. Okay, so don't be worried. It's nothing to be get scared of. So now what I have done, remember in the starting what I did, I need to set up a toggle breakpoint. Toggle breakpoint is nothing but like you do just do a right click and you click on this, a point is set up here. So basically the control would stop here. Okay, the control is completely here. Okay, if I would have set a toggle breakpoint here, the control would have been here. Okay, first let's stop the debug. Let's terminate the debug. I've terminated the debug. Okay, let's again start the debug. Okay, not this. I will go back to my Workday perspective and I'll again do a debug. Again, it will start. I'll just do a debug. Let it happen. Okay, switch to debug perspective. So basically, it does not happen so much. It will be on the first component only, on this eval component. Now, the first thing is the control is over here. Okay, there are many things to be seen over here. Okay, many things. So things that I need to explain you is basically the assembly debug thing. Okay, here I will just have to drag this. The properties, I'll tell you message part header. So basically it has stopped here. To go to next component, we generally press an F2, sorry, F6. Okay. So, so if you press an F6, I'll just press an F6 here. Just give me a minute. So step over is F6. So if I give an F6 and if I again press an F6, it goes over here. Okay. Now if it goes over here, so many things has to be seen. Okay, message root part. What is message root part? Now, if message root part is means you say many time mediation context and everything, right? So what is there in the inside this mediation context? This is what is stored. Basically, what you're seeing is a get integration system response, which is the part of start here. Start here behind the scenes actually launch a web service known as get integration system request. What it gets get in turn is a get system integration response. Okay, this is what you see here. Now, few things I want to show you here is see this country. These are variables, sorry, properties. If you see here, okay, these are now again. If you see one, there is one more thing that I wanted to explain you is the scratch pad. What do you mean by a scratch pad? So see, this statement has been evaluated, right? This statement has been evaluated. So if I see a property view, I'll just find like say lp.country name. Okay, I'll just copy this. Okay, and I will just cross it. So I'll give an expression here, control B, lp.country name. Okay.
Okay.
And if I press on A plus B, see it has evaluated this and it has given this props as a value of France.
Okay.
So you know, okay, this props carry the value of France.
Okay.
Now the control is here, that's why you're seeing as France. Now if there was a control over here that is green over here, you wouldn't have seen the value as France because it has not yet captured and stored it inside the props. It is still here in the next. So can you go previous in this debug? Unfortunately, no. You cannot go back in debug. Okay, you can only front or next, basically next component. Okay. So from one toggle breakpoint to second toggle breakpoint, if you want to go, you can press F8. But from one component to other component, if you want to go, you can just press F6. F6 is what? Component by component, jumping component by component, component by component. F8 is one toggle breakpoint to other toggle breakpoint. Directly it will skip to other. But so basically scratchpad is used for what? Scratchpad is used to actually get all the, so if I'll just your variable values. So if you see there is a language here, okay? Now what is the value of this language? If I'll just try to control A, control V, and A plus B run. So there's no, so okay, why there is no language? Because I didn't went into the tenant and I didn't configure the maps, right? I didn't configure the maps, correct?
Correct.
France, French I have not configured. Hence it is not coming, nothing is coming. But if I give date, like if I give a date, and if I just do the same here, if I again do a scratch pad here, date comes. So whatever things is there, it comes, right?
Correct.
Let's say what happens if we again press next. Basically the debugging terminates because nothing is there to process next. Okay. The debugging terminates. So it's a normal thing. So so scratchpad is for what? Scratchpad is for basically getting what all next, like scratchpad is for what all props values the inside the props what all values are stored. That's a scratchpad. What is a message? Apart from scratchpad, there is something known as message root part. Now, what is message root part basically is what is stored inside the mediation context. So let's say I'll give you an example. Okay, I will. What I'll do, I'll put a write component here. Okay. I'll put a write. I'll just go back to debug. Sorry, Workday perspective. I'll put a write component here. There is a message content. I'll cross it. Okay. I will say root message mediation context changed. So see, I've done a update to the studio, so I have to again redeploy it. Okay, I cannot again debug. So a studio won't understand that whether the things are not yet in the tenant, right? So I have to deploy it. So I redeploy it and okay. So I've redeployed it, and here let's again debug it. I'll show you how things quickly change in debug. Now I'll again debug it. Okay. Same thing, again the same. Okay, switch. Now see here. Okay. Now where am I? I am on this first component. Okay. Let's see the message root part. This is the message root part. Correct. This is what previous. This is what inside the mediation context, whatever we say, or we say response of the first component. Okay. Let's the next component. The context is same. Okay, nothing changed to context. I'm just looking at whether the context is changing. Let's go to next component. See, the context got changed. So write did what? Write actually changed whatever was coming from behind. So write actually changed whatever was coming from behind. It changed the mediation context. So when someone asks, okay, what is the difference between a copy component and a write component? So the basic difference or the most important difference between a write component and a copy component is copy component basically copies your message. and
Right.
maybe stores it in a variable that you can use it later. Okay.
Mhm.
Write component changes your message. Okay. Whatever message coming from behind, it will change the message. Copy component won't do that. It will either store it. Using write also you can store it, but write will actually go ahead and change it, whatever was coming behind from behind. So it will flush the mediation context. Basically, I would say that. So that's how write is changing the things here. Okay. Now if I go to next, comes over here. So slowly and steadily, if we see what all things are happening, we are seeing the variables. Okay, what all variables are, launch parameters are there. Yeah, attachment is not there. Message root, but I was trying to show you message root part. Breakpoints is what that where I have put in my breakpoints. Okay, I have given in my breakpoints 3 places, and there is one more thing that is known as scratchpad. Important thing I'm just showing you. Message headers are also important, but not that used generally when we are when we are actually going ahead and using our studio. But if you see here, this scratchpad is giving us the value. Now, how do this scratchpad would help us understanding the logical error? So when we'll actually debug our studio, we'll give those from the previous component, we'll do next, and we'll give the props value, and we'll see what value exactly it is bringing. And when we'll see what value exactly it is bringing, we'll know, okay, this value is wrong. This value has to be corrected. This props is not working correctly. It is not giving us the proper value that it was expected to do that. Okay, it was not doing that. Hence, this is a problem. How did we knew this? By scratchpad, as it was giving us the values. How do we know what is coming from behind from the message root part? Okay, where do we stop our how can we stop our means controls by using a toggle breakpoint? How can we switch over one component to another? It is a F6 button. From one breakpoint to other, it's an F8. Okay, the shortcuts are there also. Step over 6. Step return is F7. F8 is F8. Yeah, resume is not F8, but to go to next toggle sound, there is an F8. These are the things to be understood on debug part. Now, people don't use debug much. I too don't use debug much. I'll be frank. Why I don't use it? Because debug are generally slower in nature. Okay. Now you see it takes around 1 minute, 2 minutes time. Okay. To then launch, then again to run. So it takes it's a bit of a slow process, I would say. We don't prefer slow process. We go for we'll put it in a log and we'll see what's there in the log. Use the logging process, either a consolidated report process. That's the thing that we do. Okay. But generally, when there's a logical mistake happening inside studio, we have to go for debug. And we need to understand debug also, because later, it's not now, but some of the other point we may require understanding of a debug, how debug works, and we may not know it. That's a problem then. Okay. And it's not a big thing to understand debug. So I've just told you things. Now, at what component this toggle breakpoint can be there, it can be on every other component. Okay. So if I take an example of a big studio, like I showed you a very small studio. So if I'll take an example of a very big studio, like this kind of a studio, inside every component I can put a toggle breakpoint. Where I cannot put a toggle breakpoint, like I'll tell you, like here also local outs also I can put a toggle breakpoint. Here also I can put a toggle breakpoint. No, here I cannot. So these are the components, like inside route strategy I cannot put a toggle breakpoint, but on a route I can put a toggle breakpoint. So most of the components we can put a toggle breakpoint. Now toggle breakpoint would do what? Basically, the control would stop there. Okay, that's the use of a toggle breakpoint. So that's how efficiently debug helps us to understand the logical mistakes that we may or we may not do inside a studio. Okay, that's how studio debug works. Now, if I open a tenant, okay, let me open the, so if you see this, you can see, right? Completed. So basically we'll launch the integration through
Okay.
Studio and it has shown you. Okay. So that's how debugging works. Oh, sorry. That's how debugging works for us. Okay. That's how debugging is happening for us. I'll just go ahead and, so you saw how do debugging takes place. Okay. Now, what I showed you was an outbound integration, right? What I showed was an outbound integration. Let me reshare it. I'm just not sharing the screen. So what I showed you was an outbound integration. Okay. But how would a debug take process in case of inbound integration? Okay. Now I have uploaded inbound. How do you load the file in inbound? Okay. While you are launching it from the studio. Simple thing again. So if I go ahead and launch this, do a debug again. So in debug dialog, okay, you get something known as event documents. Okay. It will say as of now there is no retrieval service being used. Okay. So here it's where you can load your event document. So you can either set, so retrieval service is not there, so it's not activated. Okay. But once it's activated, so you can actually load the document here directly from your system.
Okay.
Or like system is here. From your system, you can put a document here. Directly you can document here and it will run. It will take that file. And next all process would be same. These are your configs regarding debug, and authentication is basically what you are using. Okay, as a login. And that's how you debug. So this is how debug works. Okay. This is how it works. So that's regarding debug that I wanted to show you. Now, see, it's a very small thing, right? We didn't took much of a time to understand debug, but it's a very important thing to understand debug things. Now, when I wanted to, like we discussed yesterday, I wanted to make you understand the design perspective of a studio. So whenever you go ahead and designing a studio, okay, first time someone is giving you a studio that I want to design a submit payroll input or an import payroll input to update payroll input data. Okay. How do I go ahead and do that? The question is, how do I go ahead and do that? See, the thing for this, the answer for this is, I need to open my notepad. So let's talk about only inbound studios. Inbound studios design. When I say inbound studio design, it follows few processes. The first is initialization. Initialization. The second would be initialization is the first one. The second is retrieval. Third is validation. The fourth is process. The fifth is audit. And the sixth is error handling. Any of the inbound studios in the studio ecosystem would always follow this structured flow. Any inbound studio, it may be any complicated studio or not. Okay. It will be always followed by an initialization, retrieval, validation, process, audit, and error handling. So if I break every one of them, how would I define them? Okay. So if I want to break every one of them, and let's say there is a task given to you that, okay, you need to design and you need to develop an inbound studio. For this initialization, first you need to capture your launch parameters. Correct. That's the first thing that you do in initialization. Second thing that you do is capture your integration attributes and maps.
Correct.
Second thing, what else in initialization you do? Declare your global variables. Global variables that you use basically in your studios anywhere. The fourth thing that you do is declare again your hash maps or hash sets if you're using anything. Hash map or hash sets. What else in initialization you are doing? Yeah, these are the things that you do in initialization. Okay, you try to capture everything. Okay, basically LPs, that is called as launch parameters, prop, basic integration attributes, map, global variable declaration, hash map, hash sets. So these are the things that you do in your initialization. Okay, so that's common for all the input studios. What's second thing? That is retrieval. What do we do in retrieval? So if I say retrieval, the first thing is we retrieve the document. The first thing suggests we retrieve the document. We iterate the documents. Meaning is what? Let's say we are trying to process 2 or 3 documents, right? So we iterate it with a route component. So in retrieval, we also iterate the documents. In retrievals, we also retrieve the documents. We transform the document. Meaning is what? When I say transform, meaning is what? Let's say we have received a document on a CSV file. Okay. Basically, go ahead and transform it into an XML. Okay.
Yes.
Or let's say we have received a fixed width file. We'll use something known as an XSD in order and code it and get an XML file from there.
Yes.
So text to XML that we say. So for CSV to XML, there is a component already available there. So that's how we, and if there's a pipe delimited file also, we'll do CSV to XML only. The separator would be pipe. So we transform the document, and the last thing that we do, we store the final document anywhere. It may be in a variable somewhere. Okay? That's the thing that we do in a retrieval process. Nothing else. Okay, as simple as that. What do you mean by validation now? So validation, in validation, the first step is we verify the input file contents. Whether the data in the input file is there or means that we can do in retrieval process also. Okay, not that we can do in retrieval process also. Actually, we should do it in retrieval process only to validate that the data is there inside the file or not. But in validation, we verify the input file like in retrieval, we have verified whether the input file is empty or not. In validation, we verify the input file contents are valid or not. Okay. Now, how can you verify input file content is a valid content? Okay. For an example, I will send you 1, 2, 3, 4 as an employee ID. Now, how do you verify that whether that employee ID 1, 2, 3, 4 exists in a tenant or not? So you should have some reference to that, right? Means you should have some thing already there with you, a repository already there with you, from which you can verify that okay, the input file sent 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me match with this. If 1, 2, 3, 4 is present in this, I would say in this pot of employee IDs, then it is a valid employee ID. Now, how do I fill this pot? Okay, when I call this is a pod means it, I may say it is a hash map or a hash set. Okay, so basically I would either before validation in the process of validation, before we verify the input file content, we generally go ahead and we either call a RAS report or a web service in order to store the file in order to store the employee IDs. Okay, whatever is there or something. Okay, so now whatever is coming from the input file, we'll verify against the what we have stored from the RAS or web service. Okay. If that is fine, we'll say, okay, the input file is a valid content, or that this content of input file is valid. Let's say we have received 5 rows of data, and out of 5, let's say there are 2 rows which is not valid. So we'll not take those rows and we'll make those rows errored out in process. Right? It doesn't make sense to again send those 5 rows when we know 2 rows are not a valid row. So rather, what we'll do, we'll just send them to the audit file only directly from there, right? Saying that these 2 rows is an invalid row. Okay, it's not a valid row. We'll aggregate those invalid rows in an audit file directly from the validation step rather than actually processing it to the next step. So validation step, we either call the RAS or report a web service to actually store the data first of the tenant. Second step that we do is verify the input file contents. Okay, that's the second thing we do. Once this both step is done, then we actually go to the process. Now, process would differ for different kind of studios. Till here, all studios would follow the same thing. Now, from every other studio would follow their own path. Okay. For an example, you're constructing an off-cycle studio. So here you need to call a different like web service like off-cycle web service. You need to get the priority. Then based on the priority, you'll update the data. That's how the process of off-cycle goes. When if I'm talking about payroll input, okay, you'll call a submit payroll input web service. Let's say if I'm talking about put background check, you'll call a put background check web service. So the process here basically is either updating the data or creating the data inside the Workday. So in process, what we generally do, we either process or we either update data inside Workday. Okay, we either process or we either update data inside Workday. That's the thing that we do in process. Okay, generally this process steps load the actual file content into Workday. This is what process would do. Inside Workday, we'll actually load the data here in process. Okay, so from here we may either get a success file or an error file, or a not error file, I would say success row or error row. If we get a success row, we again aggregate that in audit. If we get an error row, we'll also aggregate that in audit. So in audit, we will have all the 5 rows showing that 3 success, 2 failure, or 1 success, 4 failures. Okay, in the we basically show all the success and error rows. So this is error handling. Error handling is important. Reason being, error handling actually says us, or error handling actually shows us how do we handle any errors coming in all of these steps. Okay, how efficient we are doing that. Efficiently we are doing that. So that's the error handling is a whole step. So I'll not say error handling is something that is not needed at the last, but error handling is needed at every step. Okay, every step needs an error handling. Every step needs an error handling. So until and unless we are doing error handling in every step, this is nothing but this is a basically a global error handler. If nothing, if your any of their code is not working anyways, error handling is not catching any of the errors. So the global error handler would catch it and it would print it at the end. So this would be the global error handler doing its task. Now, this is all that I wanted to tell you regarding debugging, and this is how I wanted to tell you about inbound studio design. We'll actually design this. Okay, we'll not leave it like this. We'll actually do this. So you understood today debug, right? So and now we know we'll connect next weekend, but I wanted to give you a small assignment, okay? A very small assignment. This assignment would be a very small. I already have a class for it, okay? So don't worry if you get stuck. But the cloud would be shared at the end, okay? Whether you've done it correctly. So basically, I'll send you this also. Basically, the assignment would be need to create a studio, okay? Need to create a studio where number one, I would say, number one, you are creating a report to capture all contingent and I would say normal employee, yeah, contingent and employee with whose hire date is greater than 1st of March 2023. Okay. Now, second thing is once you have created this report, okay, create studio, okay, and this studio should generate two files. Two files in an XML format. And should give me one file for employee and one file for contingent. Meaning what? Like one file should have, let's say the report has given me 10 contingent workers, 10 employees. Okay. So this one file should have 10 employees, should have 10 other contingent workers. Okay. Now how XML should look like? Okay. So I would say the contingent worker XML should look like something like contingent worker CWR ID 1 2 3 4 5 close WR underscore ID contract start date contract underscore start underscore date. I'll just say 04/03/2021. And contract end date. If in case it does, they are not having a contract end date, it's fine. You can leave it as blank.
Okay.
But this note should be there. Like something like this. No, something like this. It becomes like this. Yeah. So something like this will come if it is not there. And at the end, contingent worker closes. So this is how a contingent worker XML looks like, followed by contingent workers. So the root would be known as CWR.
Okay.
And this would be known as CWR closed. Inside this, multiple contingent workers. Okay. So secondly, employee, basically worker XML, I would say. In this, not much of a change. I would say this would be known as now employee. I would not say employee, but I'll say worker.
Good. Okay.
This again worker. This would be employee. Similarly, this would be employee. And MPID, MPID would be hire date,
Mm-hmm.
and this would be if the employee is a rehired employee, there should be a
Okay.
Now, what is the difference between hire date and rehire date? Let you research it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So here is where the rehire date should come. Here is where the hire date should come, and this is how you need to aggregate two XMLs. Okay.
Okay.
Basically two XMLs being generated out of one studio.
Mm-hmm.
But one catch area
Mm-hmm.
that you need to basically also follow proper error handling mechanism. Means if anything errors out,
Okay.
so you should have a proper error handling. You should have a critical error handler. You should
Mm-hmm.
have error. If
Okay.
anything, like let's say if there is, let's say if there is no contract end date, okay,
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
any one of the contingent worker, any one of the contingent worker in this whole file, the
Mm-hmm.
integration should complete with warning.
Okay.
It will generate, but if there is for every worker is a contract end, integration complete successfully. Okay.
Okay.
Simply for work employee ID, any one employee, if let's no leave it for the employee ID, we don't need, but for contractor, we need this condition. Let the employee ID be as it is. So that's I'm trying to give you a kind of a homework.
Okay.
Let's start with this. Let's do this, and
Okay.
let's see how you. I don't want to see it's a simple studio, but I want to actually check how do you design this studio. Okay,
Okay.
it's more of not of solving the problem. Okay,
Okay.
it is more of how do you approach the problem. Okay,
Okay.
so I am not interested in the solution. Okay, I know you can get the solution. Okay, it's
Mm-hmm.
a I know you will do it, but I want to see how do you take approach for doing this.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the homework for you. Okay, you
Okay.
have to take a 2 week time and try to finish this. If anything comes up, you're not understanding,
Mm-hmm.
you can ping me anytime.
Okay.
Okay, so I would be available to happily answer, except I would not give the solution or the class. So that will be done next Saturday, of course. I would not leave if nothing works. We'll actually discuss it. And
Okay.
but the first thing is I want to see. Let's see how your approach is. Okay, and if everything is good, then
Mm-hmm.
we'll discuss your class next week. Okay, and I'll send all this thing to you so that
Okay.
it remains with you.
Okay.
And that's how we conclude the session today. So any doubt?
Yeah. Thank you so
Let's
much.
meet next week. Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
See you next week. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for attending the session. I hope you all enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Also feel free to ask your questions in the comment section below, and we will reply to them at the earliest.